Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I think now we're cooking with gas, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as I indicated a few moments ago, I want to add my voice to this very important discourse in this House. And I recall some time ago, the motion was introduced together with the value-added tax and, of course, the motion to vary the VAT to accommodate the tourism sector, together with the tourism levy bill and the St. Lucia Tourism Amendment Bill. The government at the time claimed that it had to review certain aspects of the legislation which, according to the government, could give rise to misinterpretations. All of these matters have been placed on the agenda today, Mr. Speaker. This is because these matters are all linked in a very special way. More specifically, Mr. Speaker, the reduction in the value-added tax is linked to the implementation of the tourism levy. In the Prime Minister's opening remarks and in presenting this motion to the Parliament, did indicate that he's trying to establish a revenue stream for the Tourism Authority. The resolution to reduce the value added from 10% to 7% will, of course, in my soundness of judgment, result in a reduction in revenue. It would be important, Mr. Speaker, for Parliament to know the quantum of revenue that would be lost as a result of the reduction in the value-added tax proposed in this resolution. We would then need to know how much revenue will be collected by way of the tourism levy, which is proposed, according to the Prime Minister and the Minister of Tourism, at $3 for accommodation at or below US $120 and $6 for accommodation above US $120. The levy is proposed to be collected by the St. Lucia Tourism Authority, which is part of the Minister for Finance plan to create dedicated revenue streams. I will have more to say about the practice of earmarking revenues a little later, Mr. Speaker. The Minister for Finance needs to clarify whether the two proposals, namely the reduction in the value-added tax and the tourism levy, is revenue enhancing, or, as he indicated or adumbrated, revenue neutral, or would yield a reduction in revenue. Clearly, under rationale for this particular approach. I will also examine the distributional consequences of this policy, namely which hotels benefit from this policy. I will also spend some time, Mr. Speaker, on examining efficacy of the ad valorem tax, which is percentage tax like the value-added tax, vis-a-vis a specific tax, which is a dollar amount like what proposed for the tourism levy, according to the Prime Minister. I will examine first the case for an ad valorem tax as in the case of the value-added tax, compared to the specific tax as in the case of the tourism levy. In the case of the value-added tax, the tax is levied on the cost of the goods and services. As the price of the good or service increases, the tax increases. For example, if the price of a good increases from $100 to $120, if the tax is 10%, the tax increases from $10 to $12. This is the experience we all face when the price of goods rises in the supermarkets. In the case of the specific tax, the tax does not increase when the value increases. It only increases when the number of bed nights increases, as the tax is a dollar amount on bed nights. If the hotel increases its accommodation rate from US $200 per night to $240 US per night, the tax will remain at $6 US per night. In the case of the value-added tax, the tax would have increased, assuming a current rate of 10%, from US $20 to US $24, a $4 increase. It is clear in the time of price increases, the ad valorem tax performs better for the government than the specific tax. In the language of the economists, we will say that the real value of the specific tax has fallen as it can buy fewer goods and services. The issue of earmarking taxes, as the government proposes, Mr. Speaker, with the creation of a revenue stream with the tourism levy is not recommended as best practice. Not recommended as best international practice. It is recommended that all revenue should go into a central pool, and then the government should prioritize how it should spend the revenues that is collected. The creation of a revenue stream for the tourism authority would be onerous on an economy which suffers a major external shock which impacts disproportionately the non-tourism sectors. The revenue contraction felt by these sectors would have to be borne by other sectors, as they would not be able to benefit from the revenue accruing from the tourism levy. Equally, if the tourism sector, Mr. Speaker, were to suffer disproportionately from an external shock, as in the case of COVID-19, then it would severely impact the tourism authority in terms of its marketing programs. This could be particularly troublesome if the tourism authority has incurred substantial commitments through marketing. The diminished revenue flows would severely affect its capacity to meet the repayment obligations. Mr. Speaker, to put it bluntly, I do not see why the Minister for Finance wishes to propose these changes, and there are no clear benefits in doing so, Mr. Speaker. If there is a dedicated fund for the tourism authority, there is an external shock, the minister and others made their arrangements, have their commitments. How do we actually meet those commitments, Mr. Speaker? Finally, Mr. Speaker, I would like to address the issue of the beneficiaries of those proposed new arrangements in the reduction in the value-added tax and the simultaneous implementation of the tourism levy. In order to examine these scenarios, Mr. Speaker, I will use some examples to illustrate my point. Firstly, I will look at hotels charging prices below US $120, in which the levy is US $3 per night. Let us look at a scenario for a hotel charging $100 per night. The reduction in the value-added tax from 10% to 7% will result in the value-added tax of US $3. At 10% VAT, as it is currently, it will increase $10. At the reduced rate of 7% VAT, the government would collect $7. The $3 reduction in VAT would be offset by the tourism levy of US $3. So there would be no net change in revenue for the government. The only difference is that the tourism levy would be collected by the tourism authority. If the hotel charges US $120 per night, the change in the VAT from 10% to 7% will result in a reduction in the VAT by $3.60 US. With a tourism levy of US $3, government overall stands to lose 60 cents per bed night. However, if a hotel were to charge $121 US per bed night, the revenue lost from VAT would be US $3.63, while the tourism authority would collect $6 US. It is clear that these hotels will now have to increase the tax inclusive rates to compensate for the higher tourism levy for rooms above 120 US. This would apply to all hotels which charge up to $200 per night. And we know, Mr. Speaker, that most of the tourists that come to St. Lucia, they are price-sensitive passengers. These are the people who are in coach class. We have a very limited business class coming here. And we will examine those who come to business class, how this particular arrangement is impacting them and the hotels. at US $200 per night. The impact of the reduction from 10% to 7% is US $6, which would then be recouped via the tourism levy of $6. So, Mr. Speaker, hotels which charge from US $101 up to $199 will be required to increase most likely their rates. This could have implications for those hotels, especially since they actually operate in a highly competitive, price-sensitive market. The main beneficiaries of this new policy by this government are the hotels which charge very high room rates, Mr. Speaker. For example, a hotel which charges US $400 per night will see a reduction in the value-added tax from 10% to 7% of US $12. The tourism levy is, however, only $6, resulting in a reduction in revenue to government of US $6 per night. This situation is compounded for hotels which charge, say, $1,000 US per night. The reduction in VAT would be $40 US per night. The government is still only collecting $6, thus incurring a loss of US $24 per night. The guests who can afford to pay these high rates, Mr. Speaker, are not likely to be those who are price sensitive and likely to shift from hotel to the next in response to a small increase in price. This segment of the market, Mr. Speaker, tends to be price inelastic. So it is clear, Mr. Speaker, that this policy benefits the hotels which charge the highest rates, those that are price insensitive, and the majority of the hotels probably would be impacted negatively. It is for this reason, Mr. Speaker, I have expressed concern about this approach at this juncture in time. Any motion to benefit hoteliers in this country, and that would have a net benefit to the St. Lucian economy, I have no problems with it, Mr. Speaker. But one thing I will say, of course, it would also make tax collection very troublesome, very cumbersome. So now the hotels have to deal with inland revenue on one hand, and having to deal with the tourism authority on the other hand. So when we are talking about an era where we're supposed to be moving into tax efficiency, we are being very inefficient if we should assume that posture, Mr. Speaker. And so I'm hoping that in summing up, the Prime Minister will clarify or illuminate further his strategy at this juncture in time for introducing that. I know he has been talking about that from the time he entered office, but I think he has introduced it in a very confusing way and in a very hasty way without in-depth analysis in my soundness of judgment. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.